All right, for his analysis of day one of the Glasgow Climate Summit and the fallout from Scott Morrison's war of words with Emmanuel Macron, let's bring in federal political editor at the Daily Telegraph and, of course, one of your favourites, Outsiders co-host James Morrow, who joins me now from Sydney. James, thank you. Let's go to COP26 first, if we can, and the Prime Minister's speech overnight. A lot of language we'll find familiar, a lot of use of the word technology. Interestingly, in there was an announcement of $2 billion for a so-called climate financing scheme in the Indo-Pacific. Today's speech, or overnight speech, what did you make of it all?
Well, look, it's one of these things where Scott Morrison was basically cornered into going. There was this whole political push for him to go, a corporate push for him, and he had to go. But what he seems to not have done is given away the farm. And that's the best, I think, that we can hope for. And he's actually come out of this, I think, with some sort of dignity intact for Australia. And it's really interesting because you can tell how he's doing by just how angry Twitter is getting at him. And you look at Twitter and The Guardian and places like that, and they're absolutely furious that he hasn't given away the farm on all of this, which I think is, to his credit. Now, I am concerned when you hear things like a $2 billion climate scheme for this or that or the other thing, because I think that gives a real lie to his claim that this will be done without taxation. No, it will be done with taxation if it's coming out of general revenue, and you and I are paying for it, Peter. But, you know, the fact that he has held his mettle, I think, somewhat on this while this whole thing has quite predictably started to fall apart because, of course, all the big players aren't coming along. Joe Biden is there mumbling his way through the whole thing, falling asleep, and Congress won't give him whatever he wants anyway. The UK has got its own problems with its commitments. I think that he's going to come out of this with at least some sort of dignity intact, even if Twitter and the left are going to be absolutely furious with him.
Yeah, well, just on that then, why bother? I mean, why bother if all the big emitters are not committing to net zero 2050? If India only has a loose aspiration of 2070, China's got growing emissions to get to 2060. You made the point, you're absolutely right. Biden can promise the world there at the podium, but he cannot deliver it through the Congress. We know they never even signed up to Kyoto, nor did we. But we met all the climate targets out of Kyoto and beyond, and we're on track to exceed almost by 10% our emissions reduction commitments out of Paris. Why did we have to make net zero by 2050 such a fight here in Australia when the rest of the world's not with us?
Well, look, I think we should just simply say, you know, we will follow India's lead, India being the world's largest democracy, and they're going to go for it by 2070, and that's 50 years or 49 years hence. And, you know, if they can make it by then, you know, we might be able to as well, because that is actually the moment that I just thought the whole thing really came down in a heap intellectually for me when they're saying 2070, pledge 50 years out. I mean, you know, Greta Thunberg is going to be in her retirement home, you know, on the coast of Norway by the time that happens.
Look, I agree, but I could have written the script for you at the start of the year on this. Let's go to the point you made there about Sleepy Joe Biden, putting the sleepy into Joe Biden. We know at home he's got tanking polling numbers, a crucial gubernatorial race in Virginia. There was an NBC News survey out showing his personal ratings now are almost underwater. 42% of Americans approve of his performance. Worse still, some 71% think the US is on the wrong track. But in Glasgow, he was sleeping away. Let's have a look.
Make decisions and reach agreements which will affect the lives of generations to come. You are in a position of extraordinary power. You can change forever the trajectory we are on. You can...
Now, I know from first-hand experience these things are tedious beyond belief. I don't blame him falling asleep. I have done that in the past, but I'm not the leader of the free world. He has a problem here that isn't going away, is it, James? No,
he's got a huge problem, Peter, and the United States has a huge problem, I think, as long as Joe Biden is president. You know, all of those numbers that you recited before, especially that 71% of Americans saying things are heading in the wrong direction, that's a devastating number. I've never seen anything like that. We're going to see overnight, I think, numbers coming out of Virginia, where there is this crucial governor's race, and it will show, if the Republicans pick it up, that they have a path back to power through the suburbs, because you know, the Democrats have gone so hard and so far on things like critical race theory in the classrooms, all sorts of far left, political correct, you know, woke ideological nonsense that has just alienated so many people in the mainstream. If Youngkin picks it up in Virginia, that's going to be huge. And you can tell how worried they are by the number of dirty tricks the Democrats have been playing in this campaign. But I want to give you a couple other poll numbers. You know, there are now, I've seen two separate polls. One had 42%, one had 43% of American voters thought that Joe Biden wasn't mentally sharp enough to be president. That's huge. I mean, it's huge that they're even asking the question. Another poll I saw, a Marist poll, said that, you know, when you dove into the crosstabs of it, you found that both in the suburbs and rural areas, but also in the cities, which is supposed to be the real Democrat heartland, voters want a different candidate for the Democrats on the ticket at the next election. This is really, really worrisome for Joe Biden and Joe Biden's handlers, because he's going into this. He's had 80 million people voted for him at the last election, and now there's absolutely no support for him. And the anti-Biden forces are, you know, not this top-down, celebrity-driven thing like they were with the anti-Trump forces. They're coming up from the grassroots. You know, that's what this whole Let's Go Brandon thing is all about. It's about just a complete rebuke to the Biden class and the media class that has been carrying him and carrying water for him for all these many months.
Well, let's go to the media class. I'll have a grab in a moment to play of Anthony Albanese. I think he's breached the usual protocol about how you treat a travelling Prime Minister as opposition leader. There are sort of accepted rules when the boss is overseas, and it's returned to you should you be Prime Minister down the track as well. You wrote about the spat with Macron on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today. You were spot on. It's the prism of his election contest next April, and you know, a bit of a push, I think, there from the right in France. But let's just have a look at Anthony Albanese.
The attempted damage control by selectively leaking private text messages is quite an extraordinary step for an Australian Prime Minister to take. Leaders of countries and indeed people in their everyday life need to be able to engage in a professional way. And the leaking of this selected text message isn't the first time that we've seen that occur from this Prime Minister. Pretending also that personal criticism of him is criticism of Australia is using our nation as a human shield.
Now, I know from pollsters that voters have a hesitation about Anthony Albanese being on the world stage representing Australia. And I think that's why, tactically, he's going so hard on Morrison here, as I said, in breach of the usual protocols when the Prime Minister's out of the country.
Well, I just think that, you know, it's absurd for Albanese to go out there and start essentially taking the side of the French in this dispute, when I think that most Australians looked at the AUKUS deal when it came down and said, no, we agree with that. We needed to make that shift from the French diesel Naval Group subs to the deal that we were doing with the US and the UK for faster, more powerful nuclear-powered submarines. For him to I think he's greatly misread the room here, and I just don't think that there's a single vote to be found in saying, oh, the French are mad at us, you know, this guy's incompetent. And that's not going to work.
I don't think Australians are worried about the French, other than maybe if they stop the champagne coming to this country. But anyway, leave it there, James. Thank you as always for your time.
See you, Peter.